Hi, my name is Hannah. I'm an OD3 student,
My name is Aubrey. I'm also an OD3.
and we're going to talk about how we prepared for the OAT or the optometry admissions test. So, first question is, what was the main prep tool that you used?
So I chose the Oat Prep by Kaplan. I was recommended to use this by a friend. I worked through the Oat Review notebook start about 6 months before I planned to take the exam, doing about 3 chapters a day. And then a couple months leading up to it, I started the live course online. I really liked how the book and the class broke down each topic and provided a lot of sample questions to go with each topic. And I would definitely recommend this as a study tool.
Yeah, so I used the OAT Destroyer book set. I went at it in a little bit more of a self-taught way for studying for the OAT. I actually went to the website that has a breakdown of all the different topics that they can quiz you on for each section, and wrote those all out. And then when I went through the OAT Destroyer books, I would write down any notes underneath those like main categories, and then any practice questions I had trouble with or wanted to remember that topic a little bit better. And then after that, I took more of an approach of like doing practice tests and just kind of working along during my 6 months through each course at a time until I felt like I had a good grasp on it. It was a cheaper option since there wasn't any live review sessions or external help from like another person or instructor. So I did find that for cost effectiveness, I would use it again, and I did well, which was why I liked it. So. All right, so next, how much did you spend prepping before the OAT? So we both used about 6 months, like we stated before. A lot of times they recommend a minimum of 3 months. I felt like this was going to be too much of a cram. I definitely needed more time than that. Versus 9 months, I felt like I was going to forget what I had studied. It wasn't going to sink in as well. It was almost too much time, and I'd probably end up procrastinating a little bit more if I had given myself that much time. So 6 felt like the perfect minimum for me.
Right, and that's exactly what I did too. I also felt like 9 months, I probably would have started to forget what I started that first month. 3 months, I don't think I could have crammed all of that information in 3 months, though I know a lot of people who did around 3 months and did really well. So definitely have to find that happy spot for yourself when you're studying.
Yeah, I would say definitely go based off of what works best for you, what you kind of know for your study style, and then just stick to a schedule and keep it. All right, so next up, we're going to talk through some things that we found the most helpful while studying and some of the things that we didn't find really helpful. So Aubrey, take it away.
Yeah, so one of the things I found most helpful was doing the practice exams. It's really important that you put yourself in that situation of what it's like to take a long exam like the OAT. Most of my studying was done in cafes or in the library, which is not exactly the same kind of environment that you'll be taking the exam. So I'd recommend maybe booking a private office or something like that to take the exam somewhere super quiet where you have no distractions at all when you're taking the practice exam, and really pretend like you're taking the exam so you're not surprised how it feels to sit through, a couple hours of an exam, and only take breaks when you would actually be allowed to take breaks on the exam so you can get used to that timing.
Yeah, one of my most helpful tips was using YouTube videos or other resources. This was a big one for me since I didn't have a live instructor and I was doing more of a self-paced OAT study part. The biggest one that I used was Chad's videos. He's pretty famous, I feel like, in the community when you're prepping for OAT. I think I did the basic like $20 a month, and I mostly focused on physics because that was one of the topics that I was least confident in, and I didn't feel like I had enough background through my undergrad. So I think found him really helpful for physics, and then other just like YouTube searches for things, watch some other students' recommendations, and just even though you have like your main source, like mine was OAT Destroyer, Aubrey's was Kaplan, like don't forget to use the other things that are out there because there's so many great resources.
Yeah, awesome. And then we're going to both go through some things that we found was least helpful. For me, that was passive studying. I would not recommend just, opening the big book and just reading through it. You need to highlight things, annotate the book where you can, and do so many practice questions. Definitely put the bulk of your timing into doing actual practice questions so you get an understanding of how the questions are written, the stems, and what you can expect for answer choices. So I definitely recommend doing a lot of practice problems.
Yeah, one of my least helpful things was studying to memorize only. I feel like especially in undergrad, a lot of it was like, okay, like I'm not going to study the whole semester. I'm just going to study for like a week before the test. And that was kind of my mentality. And so I had to switch that for the OAT and also for grad school. It's good to get in the habit before. But just instead of just studying and memorizing a few facts and then letting it go, really like dissecting the question, figuring out the clues in the question that you can use to answer, figuring out the choices that are for sure wrong, and then trying to reason through with other knowledge. I feel like most of the things are teaching you these general tools and helping you to get through it, but you also have to be a good test taker, and you can't do that by just reading books or passively studying or just trying to memorize it because there's just too much information to do that.
For sure.
All right, next up, we had what practice tests were the best.
So the ones that I used was the Kaplan tests that were provided through the course that I took. I've noticed for myself and other people that they tend to score a lot better on the actual oath than they did on the practice exams through Kaplan that they took, maybe just a couple days before. So don't let those scores on Kaplan discourage you. If anything, it's just over preparing you, which is good. So I still definitely recommend using the Kaplan tests and taking those very seriously when you're taking them, but just try not to get discouraged. And then I also use the full practice test from Prometric, and I would definitely recommend doing that one just because, it's very, very similar to the actual oath, so it'll definitely give you a good understanding of what you're about to take.
Yeah, I did a similar thing. Since I didn't purchase Kaplan, it was nice that Kaplan offered one free test through them, and I found that one to be really helpful. I also had the same experience where that one I did score worse on, but I feel like on the actual OAT I did much better, so that was good. And then, of course, doing the full practice test from Prometric is essential, even just to help you get used to how the test layout is going to be, what the functions of the test are, like there's calculators, other things. I think it just helps with my anxiety of like knowing when I go in what it's going to look like. That was a big one for me. And then, of course, the OAT Destroyer tests that were part of the back to the books, those were really helpful and helped break it down for different topics and whatnot for me. And then last, we're going to touch on tips for the day of. So what we would help recommend for you guys.
Right. I would recommend eating a good breakfast. I would just eat what you usually eat so you don't have any upset stomachs or anything like that. Maybe eat a little bit more than usual just, to avoid getting hungry during the test. Big tip is letting things go. If you're getting through one section and you're really struggling, when you move on to the next, forget about it. Just move on to what you're, currently working at. It's important just to keep on moving. And then make sure you have all of your documents that you need. I know there's a few things that you need to come prepared with to the exam. Make sure maybe even a few days before you have that all taken care of so you don't have any anxiety entering about stuff that, doesn't really affect your scores.
Yeah, my 3 tips were figure out transportation beforehand. Couple options for this. I'm really an anxious driver, and I didn't have anyone to take me the day of. So I actually drove to the place and found parking beforehand and figured out my whole route and where I was going to park. So I just would go and do it the day of, and I wasn't doing any freaking out if there wasn't a parking spot or if I couldn't find it. So that was the biggest one for me that helped calm my anxieties the day of. Using your breaks wisely is another one. I rushed through my first couple sections, took my break, and I ran to the bathroom and back and was like, I just want to keep going, but I didn't take a single drink of water. And then that whole next section, I was like, man, I could really use a drink of water. So even though it feels like you just want to get it done and you're so anxious, like use the break, make sure you feel good, check in with yourself, and then go back in. They're there for a reason, so definitely use them. And then the next big thing is do a brain dump at the start of each section. I know for physics, one of my prep things was to write out all the formulas I thought I was going to need. And so when I got to the physics section before starting, took my piece of scrap paper and wrote down every single formula I could remember, just so that way when I looked at the question, I could refer to something, hopefully. Same thing for like topics with things that I just couldn't remember. I'd try to write down little notes to myself before I even saw a question. And I found that this really helped when I would get into like a panic mode if I didn't know what it was talking about, to just refer to my notes and be like, okay, you do know things, you got this. So those are my biggest tips.
Yeah.
So those are most of the things that we want to talk to you guys today about. If you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out to either of us. Our emails are on the screen. We're happy to help whenever.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.